listening to the Pump Take Football Show with Jake Hills and Aidan Sneed.
Welcome back to the Pump Take Sports Show. We're doing our final mock draft one day before the actual draft, and I'm so excited I can't even hold it in for a Thursday night to just be able to see some of these guys go off the board. And the best part about the NFL draft is no matter what people mock, we're always wrong. Somewhere, someone's going to do something super weird, like the Fairley pick. I think it was 4th overall.
Yeah, nobody ever.
No one saw that coming.
Yeah.
Way out of left field, out of every mock. So that's the fun part about doing these, I think, is that you never know what's going to happen. And but we'll try our best to be predictive, as well as throw a little bit of what we think we would do in these positions. Like usual in this format, we're just going to rotate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You get the idea. And then based on the cap that we're wearing on our head, we'll make those picks for our own team. The cool thing about this offseason, I feel like more than other off seasons, I don't know if you feel the same way, is that players' values have really made major swing changes within matters of like weeks leading up to the draft. Like Jalen Phillips is a guy that's a good example of this. Like he was not considered a top 15 prospect like 4 weeks ago. And now swung to be considered that. And it's just interesting how much there's been change in kind of just grading. I feel like people are less decisive on things. Maybe that's no combine, but
no, I think that's what I was just gonna say, because like usually you do see like, because I usually start looking at draft stuff like when this season starts, so like back in September. Obviously you see big changes because you have the college football season. You see big changes from when the season starts to the end of the season, and then you see another big change from like January to the draft when people start really diving into film. But this year, because you're dealing with so much uncertainty with the COVID season and opt-outs and everything that that was thrown a wrench into because of that, you're seeing a lot of fluctuation in terms of how guys and the other thing that you mentioned was the combine and the athletic testing and the medicals. So you're seeing a lot of swings closer to the draft. Like with we're seeing I guess we see a quarterback drop, it feels like every year because of random things like what we're seeing with Justin Fields. But with Jalen Phillips is a good example because everybody I think that dove into his tape early said, okay, this guy's really he's really talented, but it was the medical concerns. And then as we're getting closer, people are, thinking about it more, and they're like, okay, every player is an injury risk. And I mean, we'll see where he goes. Maybe that does factor in, but to your point, we're seeing a lot more swings closer to the draft, which is not typical.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw
the other thing I wanted to say. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, as we started this, like I've been saying, I'm ready for Thursday because we're just seeing so many ridiculous rumors come out. Like I tweeted out last night, we're now coming full circle on the Tua being replaced rumors after the Dolphins have already like traded down and basically said we don't want to take a quarterback. Now all of a sudden, we're seeing rumors that the Dolphins are going to take a quarterback. So I'm kind of sick of that stuff. It happens every year where just people get tired, like people just getting stir crazy because they're getting so excited for the draft, and we're seeing these weird rumors. But as you said, this is our last mock draft. I got kind of sad. It's like, man, I love doing mock drafts. I don't want it to. I kind of don't want it to end. I love the speculation and building up and thinking about where these prospects are going to go. But I am really excited for Thursday night as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Because then it changes from prospecting where we think they're going to go to how we think they're going to fit on their teams. Exactly. And I mean, there will still be endless draft content for us to talk about after the draft is actually finished, because then we can talk about who won the draft. We can do team draft grades. Like there's so much fun stuff that's still going to be coming.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's the idea of it's like a fantasy football draft. Even though your team always ends up being okay, there's that possibility that everyone messes up and you just walk away with a steal, right? And drafts are what really change franchises in the long run. So anyway, enough talk about the draft. But let's talk more about the draft. So I'm going to pick Trevor Lawrence. I'm picking for the Jags. Let's not even waste any time. I mean, we could talk. I'm just going to pick him here so that goes through. We could just talk really briefly about, we were talking a little bit off air before this, just about a little bit of, you've been diving into a little bit of Trevor Lawrence's tape.
Mhm.
And through my quarterback evaluation this offseason, I'm no professional scout, but I like to be a bit of a couch scout. And I haven't really dove too deep into Trevor Lawrence. And as I was saying to you before, that's because to me, he's going first overall, and that's super exciting. But I'm more interested in the like quarterback 2 to quarterback 5 guys to see where I think I would rank them, because I feel like ranking Trevor Lawrence not number 1 seems a little bit just weird, and it doesn't seem
Mhm.
like it's you'd be hard pressed to make a case for it. But you were diving in, so if you want to give a little insight just into maybe some of Trevor Lawrence's problems, as we were talking about before, not to say he's not good or not going to go first overall, but just what you kind of see on his tape.
Yeah. So, kind of like the same as you, I watched a lot of Trevor Lawrence when he was actually like in live games, and there's so much hype around him that I felt like when I started diving into the tape for these guys, I was like, what's really the point in me watching Trevor Lawrence? Like, as you said, I'm not a professional scout either. I don't have unlimited time to be doing this. So,
Mm-hmm.
if I can save time not watching Trevor Lawrence, I will take that opportunity. But as I'm going through these guys again, I decided, I want to see what I'm curious. I want to see what he's made of. So I started out when I was going through my quarterback evals a second time, and I watched him. So I watched the Sugar Bowl against Ohio State this past year in January. I watched the 2020 ACC championship game against Notre Dame, and I watched the 2019 national championship against Alabama, and I watched him in 2020 versus Pitt. And the thing that I was surprised by is because he gets so much hype, and the people that haven't watched him would probably be surprised to know that he's not a flawless quarterback prospect. I've
Mm-hmm.
actually watched a lot of college quarterbacks that have had a lot better tape than him, in my opinion. Joe Burrow comes to mind. Baker Mayfield comes to mind. But that doesn't necessarily mean, because tape isn't everything at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's the specific things that are shown on tape that lend you to believe that he can be transcendent at the next level. So as far as his weaknesses, I saw some inconsistent accuracy, um, especially outside the numbers when he's throwing downfield. And it's not because he doesn't have the arm talent to do it. So it's just one of those things that he needs to hone in on. We've seen, there's used to be thought that you can't fix accuracy, but we've seen Josh Allen and some other guys do it at the next level. So,
Yeah.
and especially with the talent Trevor Lawrence has, it's not a crazy concern. He is a little bit indecisive as a runner. I noticed
Mm-hmm.
he is one of the things that I wrote down for his pros is that he has excellent mobility, and that's true. He sneaks up on you, and he can make some guys miss and that kind of thing. But he is like kind of that baby deer type thing. Like, he doesn't really know what he's capable of. Um, and the other thing is, and this is a criticism that people have made towards Justin Fields, and I've seen it a lot more with Trevor Lawrence, and that's he gets locked into his first read pretty frequently as
Mm-hmm.
well. And again, that's a coachable thing, but I just find it funny that people are saying this about Justin Fields, but I saw it a lot more with Trevor Lawrence. And the other thing is that I wrote down for his cons is that he kind of can rush his mechanics sometimes and gets a little sloppy. Those are 4 cons that just point to the fact that Trevor Lawrence is human, but there's obviously amazing
Mm-hmm.
things that he does. The
Yeah.
thing that I mentioned to you, which absolutely blew me away and why I think he's going to be special, is his ability outside of structure to
Mm-hmm.
make plays. It's like you see him, he'll be standing still in a perfectly clean pocket, and he'll throw the ball downfield and just whiff and, overthrow his guy, or, just completely miss. And then you'll see plays where he's under pressure and he's flushed out of the pocket and he has to throw in this crazy arm angle downfield, and he'll throw it pinpoint to the only spot that he needs to throw it. So it's just these type of things. You see that, and it's like no other guy in this class can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you take him first overall. Yeah, does he miss some balls sometimes?
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, he was surprisingly let down by his supporting cast in some spots. Like, the offensive line let up a lot of pressure, I noticed. And his receivers weren't the best, especially this past year.
Mm-hmm.
When Justin Ross didn't play and that kind of thing. But anyways, those are just some things I noticed on Trevor Lawrence. I think as we get closer to draft season, it is kind of important to acknowledge that you don't expect Trevor Lawrence to come in and just instantly be a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly not. I just maligned the as we get closer to the draft, we see people just with these bullshit like knocks on players, like just to stir up controversy. That's not what I'm doing here.
No,
Like,
of
I'm
course.
not saying Trevor Lawrence should be like the third quarterback taken. I'm just saying, this is stuff I noticed. He's not
and that's
perfect.
the thing. There's nothing wrong with just talking about slight deficiencies maybe in his very perfect, like amazing game, right? No one has a perfect game at quarterback. Like not even Patrick Mahomes is perfect.
Yeah.
So it's just fun to talk about, like, because it's so easy for us to just say, yeah, Trevor Lawrence is amazing, he goes first overall, but it's just fun to see, why might he's going first overall anyway. But
well, yeah,
what are
that's
the
a good
games that
that's a good point, because like I feel like you do see it in a lot of mock draft videos, and we've done it. People just say, "Oh, take Trevor Lawrence first overall." There's no question. I do think he should go first overall, but it's not no question. Like, you should think about why he's going first overall. So
absolutely.
with that being said, I'm on the clock here at number 2. I think that's pretty much locked in, and I think that is the right pick for Trevor Lawrence at number 1. So as much as we were talking about thinking about it at least a little bit, I'm not thinking about it to the point where I'm going to change it up. So I think that's obviously still the right pick. Sitting here at number 2, I think this is a good time to say, we were talking before we pressed record, and we wanted to try and make this a little bit more of a predictive mock draft than our usual, if in spots where we can, because we're so close to the draft, and there's less of a sense for us to just kind of make picks that we know there's no chance are going to happen, just because we would do it and we think it's the right pick. So with that being said, I'm sitting here at number 2, and I think at this point it's almost nearly as locked in as Trevor Lawrence going number 1, that Zach Wilson is going to go number 2. And so that's the pick I'm going to make, even though for me, Zach Wilson is my quarterback 4, and I would take Justin Fields here in a second. I like it. To me, it's not even close. I would take Justin Fields over Zach Wilson. But I understand, even though I'm saying it's not close, it's because, it's how I think of these quarterbacks. But at the same time, I do think Zach Wilson is worthy of going number 2 overall. It's just we're in a unique situation where there's happens to be 4 quarterbacks that are really amazing in this class. So I'm going to take Zach Wilson, but I just want to make it clear Justin Fields is my quarterback number 2. And to me, I said it on Twitter last night, and somebody else said it this morning, which I found interesting. Justin Fields, to me, is a lot closer to Trevor Lawrence than he is to Mac Jones, and a lot closer. So I don't understand. I mean, there's obviously conversations about the 49ers we'll get into. But that's my spiel there on Zach Wilson versus Justin Fields. But he is going to go number 2, so he's going number 2 here in our mock draft.
Yeah, he is going to go number 2 for sure. And as I continue to dive into these other quarterbacks, I start to. I mean, no one follows my Twitter, but I tweeted out my quarterback rankings as of yesterday, and essentially, Wilson and Fields are A and B 2, so 2A 2B. So it goes Lawrence 1, 2A 2B, and then 3 4 whatever. Because to me, they're good at very different things. Justin Fields is more of and once again, I'm on the clock for the Niners here, so I need to be having these types of conversations about Justin Fields and Trey Lance and Mac Jones. So let me get off Wilson, because Wilson's going to go to 2nd overall, so it doesn't really matter about him compared to the other guys. Justin Fields is the right pick here in my eyes. Now, when we're talking about being predictive and making a pick that could probably happen on Thursday, you're seeing all these reports about Mac Jones and Trey Lance going 3rd overall. Now, I'll tell you the problem with both of those selections, in my opinion. If you're going to take Mac Jones, you don't need to trade up to 3 to get him. And I think that was understood long before right now. Like, Mac Jones has rose a lot in drafts, but then he kind of plateaued as being understood as the worst of the 5. And I don't even dislike Mac Jones. But if you're going to sell the farm to move up to 3, why take a guy you could probably have gotten at 10? Right? It's like, to move up to 3, why take the guy that, and then I contradict myself, because I'm of the thought, if you think it's your guy, you take him no matter what, because if you think he's going to change your franchise, you take him no matter what. But still, I don't understand why they would take Mac Jones here. I mean, we've been hearing this Mac Jones connected to the 49ers thing since they traded up. but I've never understood it. I saw this tweet that was funny, and I agree with it. It's like, even if Mac Jones to the Niners is minus 5,000, like, I'll believe it when I see it. Like, it'll happen when I see it, because I just don't see in Mac Jones what they would see over Justin Fields. Like, Justin Fields does everything Mac Jones does, and then has more pros as well. And then when it comes to Trey Lance, it's like, yeah, he has the physical tools there to be able to, I guess, he has a very high ceiling. And, people compare him to like Josh Allen, or people say he can like move like Lamar. And it's like, yeah, at his highest potential, maybe those things are true. But why not just take Justin Fields, who's more of a quarterback that would make everyone around him better? Like, all the weapons they have in San Francisco, Justin Fields would be better at making them better, where Trey Lance would be, I guess, more of a shot in the dark at third overall. And so, I mean, I would personally take Justin Fields here. I don't know exactly where I think the Niners are going to lean between the two guys that they're telling, or the media is telling us they're going to take. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on it quickly before I make the selection here, because it's going to be a quarterback no matter what.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is like the talk of the draft, and I think with good reason, because we're hearing. So, let me just preface by saying I'm right there with you, where I'm still at the point where, despite all the reports we've heard, I just think, like, if this was the Jets picking or something,
yeah,
where, I mean, I guess they picked before, but it feels like their decision has been made for them. But if this was an organization that didn't have a track record of being a smart organization, I would say, okay, this makes some sense to say that these Mac Jones rumors are happening. But because it's Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch and the San Francisco 49ers, and it's not like they're flawless, but I'm just saying, like, it doesn't seem like this is the type of franchise that would make this decision, because you're right. There are a lot of, and I'm talking about Mac Jones, of course. I still believe, in my money, I've definitely put money on the fact that I still believe that Justin Fields should be the favorite. But that's just my own thinking. Like, I just can't fathom why it would be otherwise. But I am also a Fields truther, so there's that. But my point is here, I think that the fact that this is the 49ers sitting here at 3, there are reasons to say, okay, it makes sense why Mac Jones would go here, right? Because Mac Jones, he showed last year, he is arguably the best quarterback in this class at playing in structure. When everything is right around him, he can make all the necessary plays.
Yeah.
The problem is, if you're just looking at it in a vacuum, sure, okay, that makes sense. But the problem is, you're not looking at it in a vacuum. And it's the same thing you said about the trade situation. Like, in a vacuum, yeah, go and get your guy, right? But we're not in a vacuum here. If you're giving up more value than necessary, then that's just a minus EV move, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you can get him at 10, or you can get him at 8, that's, and give up less. So even if, like, so the 49ers were picking at 12 to move up to 10, so they give 3 first-round picks to move up to 3. Even if you overpay and give up 1 first-round pick to move up 2 spots, that makes more sense than giving up more than you need to for Mac Jones. So, and it's the same thing that I said about him playing within structure. Yeah, if you want a guy that plays in structure, Mac Jones is great if that's all you're looking at and you're wearing blinders and you're looking at nothing else. But you're sitting here with 2 other quarterbacks, especially Justin Fields, who not only can play in structure, but has the physical tools to do more than that. So just, like, it just makes no sense. And, like, I have to question why the 49ers, who for all intents and purposes know what they're doing, would make a move that seems so nonsensical. It just is so hard to believe. But at the same time, you're seeing these reports with conviction that Justin Fields isn't even in the conversation. And it's so ridiculous that, like, I just find it hard to believe that that's the case. But at the same time, this is all we're seeing, right? It's hard to go off of anything else when we're making a predictive mock if we're seeing, Justin Fields isn't even being considered by the 49ers. So I know that was a jumbled mess of thoughts, but I mean, it's a jumbled mess of a situation here, right? Because Mac Jones is not a bad prospect. As we alluded to, we both like Mac Jones. It's just we like Mac Jones at 12. We don't like Mac Jones at 3, right? So
exactly, man.
I mean, that's the situation we're dealing with here. Mac Jones is not a bad prospect. in a vacuum, but we're not in a vacuum here. We're sitting here with multiple other prospects that would make more sense. So, I mean, that's how I feel about the situation.
No, I mean, my thoughts were just as rambled and jambled, because this number 3 pick is really where the draft starts. Like 1 and 2, like that's whatever. I mean, unless the Jets pick Justin Fields or something and way out of left field. But really, if at 3, if they take Mac Jones, well, then the fun of the draft is, well, where does Justin Fields go? Like, does he go to Detroit? Does he go to Miami? Like, there's all those questions, right? Where if they take Justin Fields, well, then it's the question, does Mac, I guess what I'm trying to say, and this is very rambly-jambly once again, if they take Justin Fields, Mac Jones is likely to fall between the 10th to 20th pick. Somewhere in there when you're talking about the Patriots, the Panthers, those teams in there. Now, if they take Mac Jones, well, then the question is, I think Justin Fields is more likely to go between 5 and 13. And team is more likely to trade up for him, which tells you, I guess, where the NFL values these guys. Well, where I think the NFL values these guys. We've never done this in our mock yet, but I'm going to take Mac Jones here at 3 as a predictive mock. To me, it's the wrong decision to make, but for some reason, that's all we're hearing. So we have to roll with that for our predictive mock. Similarly to how you picked Wilson for the Jets, I just got to do this for the Niners.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And if I were in your position picking for the 49ers, I would have done the same thing because, I mean, if the goal is to try and be right, because like if we had because I think what we're both trying to do here is just be able to look back on Thursday night and say, yeah, we did a pretty good job with the information we had in getting this right. Because if there were no, if I were just making my own mock, I would probably still pick Justin Fields because I still believe that's what's going to happen. But at the same time, we're building this entire thing based off of what we're hearing. So we can't pick Justin Fields, even if we think it's going to happen, despite everything that we're hearing. So I agree with you. I would have done the same thing there. That being said, at number 4, my opinion has changed on what I think is going to happen here since the last time we did a video because of the reports that we've heard. So last video, we had the Broncos trading up from number 9 to number 4 to select Trey Lance, I believe. In this situation, so number 1, it's been pretty well litigated that the Falcons don't seem like they're going to trade down, whether they stick here and pick a quarterback or some other position. So I don't think that's on the table at this point. If this was a non-predictive mock, I would be on the phones as the Falcons here looking to trade down at any cost. Because, looking at the roster and where it is. With that being said, a rumor came out yesterday that the Falcons are looking to trade Julio Jones. Which this is a weird situation, right? Because if I were the Falcons, what I would have done is not restructured Matt Ryan's contract. And I probably would have traded Julio Jones as well because of where Julio Jones is in his career. We see these guys who rely so much on their athleticism. And don't get me wrong, Julio Jones is amazing, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest receivers, if not the greatest receiver I've ever seen play with my own eyes watching live games. But at the same time, he's 31, 32 years old. He relies so much on his athleticism to win. He's constantly injured. And you're sitting here with the Falcons where your defense is kind of in shambles and you've got an older Matt Ryan. You're at a crossroads here as a franchise. So earlier in the offseason, I probably would have traded Julio Jones for what I could get and just out of the risk that, he pulls an Andre Johnson and just in 1 year is not the same guy that he was the year before. That being said, I would fully accept the consequences that he's Julio Jones and he's a unicorn. And
but even if you trade him and he proves you wrong in trading him, you still get the asset that I wouldn't
trade him for nothing, right? I'm trading him for what he's worth.
Exactly. You're trading him for what he's worth. So even if he exceeds the expectation and is good, but you get 1 first-round pick out of it, you still win. Because then the next year he might not be the same guy, and you're getting a guy on a 4-year. Like, to me, you trade Julio no matter what, even if he's good or bad in the following season.
And so with that being said, so that's what I would have done. I would have kept Matt Ryan around for just 1 more year, and I would have taken a quarterback, and I would have traded Julio Jones. That's not what the Falcons did. So what they're doing here is kind of like, if you believe the rumors, and the Falcons GM came out last night and said we are listening to trade offers on Julio Jones. So this kind of a contradictory thing, right? We're keeping Matt Ryan around for a few more years, but we're also trading his, the guy who has made his career for his, for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult situation, but if the move of trading Julio Jones is not a win now move, right? At least on paper. Maybe it's because they're fearing, he's going to fall off and they want to get what they can out of him. But it puts me in a tricky situation because shortly after the video came out that we did last time when we traded up with the Broncos, I kind of changed. It seemed like the Falcons were dead set on sticking here and taking a Kyle Pitts or something like that. But now, after yesterday, I'm kind of hesitant on even doing that because it seems like maybe they are leaning towards the future and want to select a quarterback here. So if we're doing a predictive mock, which we are, I'm between two situations here, and that is taking Kyle Pitts or taking Trey Lance. And honestly, gun to my head, what I think is going to happen, we obviously don't know much about the Falcons organization, and it seems like if they're going to keep Matt Ryan and trade Julio Jones, that's kind of a confusing move. But they do seem like they have some fairly smart minds in there. And if they're taking anything other than a quarterback here and not trading down, it's stupid.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind and all that information at hand here, I'm going to take Trey Lance with the Atlanta Falcons pick here. And yes, I know Justin Fields is on the board. And yes, if I were the Falcons, I would take Justin Fields. But we're not doing what we would do mock, right? Because if we were, Justin Fields would already be gone at number 2.
Yeah.
So Trey Lance here to the Falcons at number 4. Sit behind Matt Ryan for a couple years.
Yeah.
Use those tools, build up those tools, build them around, learning from Matt Ryan. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And I think the two situations that you laid out that you think could happen, being Kyle Pitts is selected at 4 or Trey Lance is selected at 4, are both the two likeliest. Now, gun to my head, I think Kyle Pitts is taken their 4th overall on Thursday. Do I think that that's the right move? No.
Me neither.
But do I think Kyle Pitts will be the first non-quarterback off the board? Honestly, if I was a betting man and I had to put money down on I am a betting man, but I had to put money down on the table and say, who will be the first non-quarterback off the board? To me, it's Kyle Pitts, and it goes at 4. I totally hear what you're saying with Trey Lance. And I think, honestly, in a predictive mock, there's a pretty good chance that happens. That's just a slight deviation I just wanted to throw out there that I think, and I know you acknowledged it, is incredibly possible as well, is that Kyle Pitts gets selected there. So now pick number 5. I don't want this video to be 3.5 hours long. You've heard all about the Chase versus Sewell debate. It's the talk of the Bengals draft. 5 is really interesting, right? Because do you give him Jamar Chase or do you give him Penny Sewell? What I think I would do is draft Jamar Chase. What I think the Bengals will do is draft Penny Sewell. So there's a debate about it all day. And both sides, right? You give Burrow his favorite weapon. You see, even in what you said about Julio and Matt Ryan, a great receiver can make a quarterback's life amazing for a decade. But this is a long-term investment into a player that, honestly, this is a guy that I've dived into his tape. Him and Rashawn Slater are not completely on different tiers. I think they're pretty similar in what they provide. But I think with the real estate you've got here, you've got to spend it on making sure that Burrow is protected for the rest of his career, right? Really, you could give him a left tackle like a Bakhtiari level guy that protects your franchise for years and years and years and years. Or you could get him a weapon. And I think there's so many weapons out there that Burrow will understand the long-term investment made for him rather than going with Jamar Chase. And it's hard for me to argue against the Jamar Chase selection because I would take Jamar Chase here, I think, and then figure it out later on the offensive line. But what I think they're going to do to appease their fans and kind of make the conservative pick here is take Penny Sewell. So I'm not going to, do laps all day about Chase versus Sewell, but I'm going to take Sewell here at 5.
Yeah, it is a heavy debate, and I understand it. The thing that I wanted to ask you, though, is do you think if Kyle Pitts falls to 5 like they did in this situation, that they would consider him at all? Or do you think they've just locked themselves into Chase versus Sewell?
I think they've locked themselves into Chase versus Sewell, personally.
Okay.
I think Kyle Pitts will be. I mean, I'm contradicting myself again. I think Kyle Pitts will be the first offensive player off the. Like, if this was just my mock, I would have Pitts 4, and then I would have Sewell 5. So that would make Pitts, because I think Pitts is the best offensive weapon in the draft. Between him and Chase, I like both of them a lot. They're both great, but I think Pitts is just has a little bit more of an edge over Chase, but they're both tier 1 offensive weapons in the draft. I like both of them far more than I like Devonta Smith or Waddle or guys like that. It's those two guys, and then there's a gap, and then the other guys. But I think the Bengals have just locked themselves into protecting Burrow. I know that, once again, the debate. It's the talk of the town with the 5th overall pick is, do they go offense or do they go offensive line? But I'm going to go offensive line here.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've talked about it before on this channel, but I do think that is the right pick. It's interesting that you think Chase is the right pick, because normally I feel like we would be on the reverse of this. Like, you would want to take Sewell and I would want to take the weapon and make the flashy pick. But in this case, I don't know. I think, and I agree with you, I think they have kind of locked themselves into Sewell, despite some of the other reports we've heard. I think they are kind of trying to make sure that he falls down the board to them. And I do think that that's going to be the pick. I think it is going to be Sewell at 5 to the Bengals. I don't think there is a chance, a really good chance, that they take Chase or Pitts. So I think that's the right pick. And the other thing is if you want to get Burrow a weapon of his from college, guess what? There's another one that is getting a little bit of medical red flags on him that has a good chance to fall to you at your second pick, and that's Terrace Marshall, who is a really good first-round talent level receiver as well, that also played with Burrow. So I think that is, just before we move on to the next pick, the last thing that we will touch on with this debate is that, and I don't think you will disagree too much, despite the fact that offensive line and what the Bengals need on offensive line, which is interior, despite the fact that that is less important to wins and easier to find than an elite receiver, in this particular draft, the receivers that will be available at their second pick are a lot better than the offensive linemen that will be available at their second pick. So anyways, we've discussed that enough. I think we both agree that that's where the Bengals will go. Now I'm sitting here as the Dolphins at pick number 6 on the clock here. And I'm in a tricky situation because we're sitting here with Kyle Pitts and Jamar Chase on the board, 2 blue chip level players. It's going to be one of those guys in this situation. In real life. They already have Mike Gesicki there. Now, Mike Gesicki is a really nice player. He brings a lot to the table. He's like Kyle Pitts, like diet Kyle Pitts, basically.
Yeah, but he doesn't stop you from drafting Kyle Pitts if that's who you.
Exactly. He does not stop me. No tight end. George Kittle, Travis Kelce wouldn't stop me from drafting Kyle Pitts, because then I just have 2 of those guys. And that's that's how hard to stop is that. So I'm kind of convincing myself here that might be what I would do, even though I've said this whole offseason that I would probably take Jamar Chase in a nutshell over Kyle Pitts, because I just think of how he's going to be used in the NFL. Like, I don't trust coaches to use him creatively enough to, maximize his value. And the Dolphins definitely need, more than anything, a true wide receiver 1, more than they need another tight end. But the Dolphins are a smart organization. They're smart. They have a smart GM with Chris Greer, and they have a smart coaching staff. So if anyone in this top 10 is going to use Kyle Pitts right, I think it might be that I would trust the Dolphins to do it. So I think if they're sitting here on the board, I think that they are probably, it's tough because,
either way,
Jamar Chase is what they need. But at the same time, we saw Kyle Pitts at Florida line up and play on the outside, which is what they need, a true X receiver. Maybe that's what they envision Kyle Pitts being for them. So it's tough making predictions rather than it is choosing what you would want to do. But I think if I'm putting myself in the GM chair of Chris Greer, I think he will go with Kyle Pitts at this pick.
I think that's a totally understandable selection. We could literally compare Chase and Pitts all day about who's the better player, but there's no point. Either way, you're walking away with a player that really changes your offense. So either one's a good selection. So I'm on the clock now with the Lions, And now this is an interesting situation because Justin Fields is sitting there. Now, here's the situation, right? I mean, I don't want this to be a 3.5-hour video, but I want our thoughts to be properly laid out. The Lions, I think, would be smart to take a quarterback, but I also think the Lions are very committed to their long-term. They want to identify now as what they are. They want to build that culture now. Now, I think you can do that with a quarterback on the bench. I think the right move here is draft Justin Fields, because you take the best player, you take the most valuable player for the Detroit Lions, right? Like, you could think, okay, well, next year we're not going to use him, so, what's the point? But the Lions need to figure it out long term. Jared Goff is not the answer. So, I mean, I'm convincing myself of it. It's just, you need to take the guy that's best for the Detroit Lions long term.
Yes.
And the guy that's best for the Detroit Lions long term is the next Matthew Stafford for them, right? That's the next guy to lead them into the next generation of football. Goff is a fine bridge guy, but they're going to cut him as soon as they can to get rid of that money off their team, off their books. And Justin Fields, you give him a year to figure it out, to just be in an NFL space, and he could do some dangerous things here too. So if Justin Fields does fall, which is the way that it has happened right now, I'm not sure how predictive this is, because the Lions have kept a pretty tightly closed book on what they want to do with this 7th pick, but they're going to let the draft fall to them. And if this is how we predict it falls, I think Justin Fields is going to be the guy that they select and kind of shock the world on Thursday with the 7th overall pick.
I like that, and it's for a very specific reason. And it's what you just mentioned at the end there. Every year, when we're doing a predictive mock, part of what we have to predict is randomness. It's easy. I mean, it's not easy, but it's easier to just say, okay, this makes the most sense. I think this is what they would do. But that's not how the NFL draft works. And you're absolutely right. We have not seen a lot. I mean, we're making assumptions about what the Lions want to do at quarterback based on what we've heard them say. But first of all, NFL teams lie all the time. And second of all, they don't say what they want to do. They just straight up don't say it all the time.
Yeah.
And you're right. The Lions have not really indicated what their approach to this draft is going to be. Mm-hmm. Generally we pick a receiver for them because they desperately need one. But when you have a chance to compare a receiver to a quarterback in terms of value in the NFL, it's not even close, right?
No.
So, and yeah, I mean, I just think I like that pick. I mean, we made it in our first mock draft, but that was like 3 months ago at this point.
Yeah.
And so much has changed. And I think that is a very interesting point, because if this is how it falls, I think there's a good chance that we do see the Lions come out with a pick that kind of surprised everybody and, kind of blows the draft away.
You need to, right? Like, this is, you need to do this for their organization. Like, if you're trying to establish something long term, like if the Packers were sitting here with the 7th overall pick, we have Aaron and Jordan Love, but you might just want to take the best. Like, we're both of the belief that the second best quarterback is always more valuable than the first best receiver. That's just how the NFL is. It's just how football works.
Probably the 5th best quarterback. I mean,
yeah, I was going to say the 3rd best quarterback, but
whoever is the lowest starting quarterback in this draft is better than more valuable than any receiver.
Because it's a quarterback's league. That's just what it's becoming.
Yes.
And the Lions need to do something that isn't so bland, boring Detroit. They need to draft Justin Fields here if he falls to them at 7. Like, I wouldn't, but if I was them, let me flip it this way. If I was them, I wouldn't take Mac Jones at 7. I would take Jamar Chase. Because to me, Mac Jones isn't.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is my evaluation once again. They might think Mac Jones is the same caliber as Justin Fields, like the friggin' Niners do. But in that situation, you just draft Chase. But in this situation, which is we're being predictive here, Justin Fields is there. You have to take the guy that could be, I mean, he's on a lot of people's boards, the 2nd best quarterback out there. And it would just be such an exciting move. And it would give the fans finally something to look forward to this year and coming up, because realistically Fields might start some of the games next season if they take him with the 7th overall pick. So anyway, you're on the clock with the pick.
No, I think there's a good chance that he does. And I mean, I don't want to litigate it too much, but I do really like that pick because it brings in this element of randomness that we're inevitably going to see in in the NFL draft when it actually happens on Thursday. And at the same time, it's not like it's random in that, it's completely crazy. Like, this is totally reasonable. If
Totally.
we think Justin Fields is better than, like, should go number 3 or in my case number 2, maybe the Lions think that too. They're historically not the smartest organization, but it's a new front office. We don't really know anything about them.
Yeah.
So I like that pick a lot. Now I'm sitting here on the clock with the Panthers, who I've never had to pick for before, except in my own mock drafts that I do. And we're seeing the wide receivers slide down the board here. And it's very interesting because the Panthers don't necessarily need a wide receiver. They have DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson as their number 1 and 2 there. So, I mean, they don't necessarily need to pull the trigger on one of these guys if they don't think the value is there. And obviously, if it were me, I would take Jamar Chase in a heartbeat. But I don't know if that's what the Panthers will do. I mean, they want to surround Sam Darnold with as many weapons as they possibly can, right? Yeah. But at the same time, they do have glaring holes on their offensive line that they basically, like, we've said it in previous videos, but sometimes NFL teams will do this thing where they go into the draft and they kind of like think about what players or what like caliber of players will be on the board when they pick, and they plan around that. It's not smart to do that, because if the draft shakes up in a way that you don't expect it to, then you're kind of screwed. But that's kind of what the Panthers have done here. Like, they have Taylor Moton, who is a star right tackle. And then they have Matt Paradis at center, who like used to be really good, but he's been terrible for the Panthers.
Yeah.
And I mean, off the top of my head, I can't really think. I mean, I know that they signed Cam Irving and Pat Elflein, but they are terrible also. So like,
yeah.
I off the top of my head, I don't know if there's another starting caliber player on that offensive line besides the center and the right tackle. So they've kind of forced themselves into a position here where they kind of need to take offensive line. And luckily, there happens to be a really good offensive lineman on the board. It's just unfortunate because, you're sitting here with 3 receivers that are much better, in my opinion, much more worthy of this pick than Rashawn Slater. But it's a predictive mock, and I think the Panthers are going to take Rashawn Slater here no matter what happens.
Yeah, I like it, man. I like the pick. Like, I mean, you explained it all. I don't need to rehash everything you just said, but I mean, it's either him or the quarterbacks are gone. They don't have an interest in Mac Jones. I don't believe that for a second.
I think only if Fields fell, they would consider it.
I agree.
I mean, at least they would be smart too.
I agree completely. I completely agree with you. And give Darnold a year, right? Give Darnold a year and see what happens with him. So now I'm on the clock.
And then the other thing is sorry, I just wanted to say the receivers are falling here, but remember, and it's not the same receiver class as last year. I think these top 3 guys are a lot better than the top 3 guys last year.
Yeah.
But if you remember last year, Judy, Lamb, and Ruggs were all projected to go, inside the top 10, and they all ended up falling. Ruggs fell to 12, Judy fell to 15, and I believe Lamb fell to 17. So it's not inconceivable that this happens.
No, it's not inconceivable. I mean, Jamar Chase would be the guy that people would probably say you're crazy not to have him off the board at 9. But then we're crazy. You know what? We're crazy. At pick number
the NFL. That's what we're doing here.
At pick number 9 with the Broncos, I think this is where their patience proves to be the right move here. And with not trading up, let the draft fall to you. And I mean, if a guy like Justin Fields fell to here, they would scoop him up, undoubtedly. But I personally think that no matter how this pie is sliced, they're going to take a quarterback here, whichever one falls to them at 9. And it's tough to be fully predictive about what quarterback that's going to be, just based on what the Niners do, because that's the real big question mark that shakes everything up. And then if the Falcons want to draft a quarterback, there's still a guy. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, they're all gone.
I was going to select Mac Jones here, but we already took him with that pick. So I guess that now puts me in a different situation.
Yeah, this is not falling the way that the Broncos
this is not fallen. The patience did not pay off in this situation. I take back everything I just said. They're not going to go receiver here because they went receiver last year. They spent a lot of capital on that, and their offense is pretty sound all over the board.
Yeah.
They could go Micah Parsons here and take the first defensive player off the board. I believe it's the first defensive player off the board. Wow. How
Yeah.
many years has it been since a defensive player was not selected in the top 8? Probably quite a few.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot of good players here that they could go. And this is a type of scenario where you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because Jamar Chase is the best player on the board, but you're not going to spend it on a receiver. I think they might take Micah Parsons here, honestly.
Mhm.
I don't
Personally,
Go
I mean,
ahead.
I don't want to influence your pick too much, but I mean, the way that this board has fallen, I don't really see, if they don't trade down here, I don't really see a situation where they wouldn't pick Micah Parsons because, like, I don't really see who else they would fit. Like, it has not fallen the way that the Broncos would want it to, but Micah Parsons is a perfect fit for their defense. So, I mean, what else do you really do? And it is tricky because, you know, we said this is a predictive mock, but we didn't do any trades. I do believe there will be a trade in the top 10, but at the same time, that's really hard to predict. I think probably we've both said, you know, if we were doing this individually, we would probably do things a little differently. In my opinion, I think we would probably see Detroit trade down with the Patriots because of the connection between their two organizations, and the Patriots would trade up at 7 for Justin Fields. But it doesn't really matter. The point, I just wanted to throw that out there, that either way, I think all these quarterbacks will probably be gone unless the Broncos are one of the teams to trade up. So even if you don't think that the Lions are going to take a quarterback, you know, someone is going to trade up for them, whether it's the Broncos or another team. So with that being said, I think the Broncos are going to be forced into a tricky situation here. And Micah Parsons is a fantastic fit for Vic Fangio's defense. So I don't really see another way that they could do it. I mean, if they don't really seem like the type of team that would want to stack up at wide receiver.
No.
Especially since they already have Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler and Tim Patrick. You know, they have some guys that they really like. So it doesn't really make much sense to go in a different direction here. And we're on the clock with the Cowboys here, so I guess I'm just going to go back to back with the Giants and the okay. So with the Cowboys here, the pick is very, very obvious.
You're not allowed to pick Christian Barmore for the Cowboys just so you can get your player for the Giants.
No, I mean, but either way, I think this and the Bengals pick for me is set in stone, no matter how things fall. The Cowboys are another team where, like, it doesn't make much sense for them to take a wide receiver because they already have CeeDee Lamb, who they just took in the first round last year. They paid Amari Cooper a fuck ton of money, and Michael Gallup is still there, who they really love. So I mean, and they still have some other guys, like they have Cedric Wilson and some other guys that they like sitting in the background too. So to me, Patrick Surtain is the pick here. This is locked in. If I had to place money on any pick in the top 10 besides Trevor Lawrence, I think I might just make it Patrick Surtain because, you know, I don't see how he goes before this. And if he falls to Dallas, it's the number one need on their team mixed with the number one player in the draft at the position. So,
and what a player to get here for Dallas. Like Patrick Surtain is, I mean, a lot of people have been talking about, like if you just look at the corner rankings here, like a lot of people have been talking about JC Horn, rightfully so. He's a great player, and Caleb Fairley, but Patrick Surtain is the best corner in this class. And for them to get him at 10, like he's arguably, not including quarterbacks, a top 5, top 6 player, football player out there. So, I mean, to get him at 10 is incredibly valuable. So you pick again for the New York Giants here at 11.
Yeah, and I'm in an interesting spot here because the way the board has fallen, there's a very good player still left for the Giants. And I really want to take him, but I have to seriously think if the Giants would do it. Because as much as I want him to end up on the Giants, I have to be realistic here. And I have to consider, you know, whether the Giants would be stupid enough to pass on him. So their number one need, in my opinion, is guard, right? There is no value on the board for guard here. Whether or not, you know, you can, even if Rashawn Slater is sitting here, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It makes no sense to take Rashawn Slater and play him at guard because the positional value is just simply not there at pick number 11. The opportunity cost is way too big because, you know, the data just suggests that the difference between a star guard, like an elite level guard, and just a guard that doesn't get his ass whooped on every single play
Yeah.
is, relatively insignificant with regards to winning football games. So with that being said, their biggest need is off the table, really. And the other thing is that whether or not you think they should take a guard or a tackle here, I think the Giants really love what they have on their offensive line. And personally, I think that's stupid. I like Andrew Thomas to turn it around a little bit, and I like Matt Pert a lot. And obviously you have Nate Solder, who's average. But I really don't like Shane Lemieux at all, who the Giants absolutely seem to love. I think he's just utter garbage. So he's one of the worst guards in the league, but they think he's going to be great for some reason. So anyways, my point is, and they love Nick Gates too, who and Giants fans love him. He's pretty bad as well. So anyways, that's going to be their starting offensive line. I truly believe that. And I think that's stupid, but either way, I don't think they should take a guard here. So the other biggest need that they have is edge. And I tweeted out, I think that Jalen Phillips will be the pick here. And, I think that is reasonable.
Yeah, it is.
For that to happen. But the thing is, when I said that, I wasn't thinking that Jamar Chase would be here on the board.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to seriously think, because edge is arguably their other biggest need. It could be even, you could say it's tied with guard for their biggest need.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love Jalen Phillips a lot. I don't know if I love him at the 11th pick in a vacuum. And I certainly don't love him with Jamar Chase sitting on the board.
Yeah.
But it's tricky.
Does Dave pull the trigger on Jamar Chase here? Does Dave do it? Dave, honestly, if I was a betting man, this is the real draft. Jamar Chase is sitting there. I don't think he pulls the trigger. I don't think.
Don't.
Do I want Dave to do it for you? Absolutely. But do I think Dave? Think about Dave sitting there. Is Dave really going to pull the trigger on Jamar?
Okay, so I'll give you this, right? If it's Dave sitting there with his finger on the button and nobody else talking him down, I you know what? I could buy into that argument. But the reality of the new power structure of the Giants is that that's not the reality of it, right? Joe Judge has a significant say in who the Giants will take in the draft, and who he has a significant say over personnel. And Joe Judge is a smart guy. We've seen the way he's kind of turned around the roster a little bit.
Yeah.
In these past couple of years, in these past two off seasons.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie to myself and say I think they're going to win the Super Bowl next year. But the difference between what the roster looks like now, after Joe Judge for 2 years versus 2 years of Gettleman, just
destroying
playing fucking Madden and signing every defensive tackle that he possibly can.
Yeah.
It is night and day.
Absolutely. I'm only smirking and laughing just because the Giants pick is my second favorite pick of the draft every year, only behind the pack, because the Giants pick for the last few years has just been so entertaining. Between the Saquon pick and the Daniel Jones pick.
Daniel Jones pick.
We have a good friend that we watch the draft with every year, and we always are just sitting there giggling like children when the Giants are on the clock. And this is a scenario where I think they would do something similar. And I hope it doesn't happen. And continue to talk. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. That's why I'm sitting here giggling, because I think the Giants are going to do something funny here. And if this is predictive. So anyway, continue with.
Yeah, I would believe it's so hard because we only have 1 year sample size, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last year, the Giants pick was kind of boring, right? I mean, it didn't look great year one, but Andrew Thomas was widely considered a very safe pick.
Yeah.
And that's 1 year of Joe, and the rest of the draft was pretty good too. We got Xavier McKinney in the second round, who was a first round talent.
Yeah.
So it's a 1 year sample size, but you have 2 years of Gettleman just making these wacky ass picks that are impossible, in some cases impossible to predict, and others insanely predictable for Dave Gettleman. But we have 1 year of Joe Judge, who kind of seemed to temper Dave Gettleman's wilder tendencies.
Yeah.
So honestly, I mean, I see the argument for saying, Dave Gettleman would take a Christian Barmore here. I certainly do. But at the same time, I honestly believe this. I don't think Gettleman has the final say anymore. I believe that the final say is Joe Judge's.
Yeah.
And I think if Joe Judge is the voice of reason in the room, first of all, let me make it clear. I know this is a predictive mock, but the way the board is shaken out, I do not believe Jamar Chase will be here. So I think it's kind of a moot point, really, because the Giants won't have the option to take Jamar Chase. I don't believe. I think if I was making all the picks here, things would have shaken out a little differently. We would have seen the Patriots trade up, and maybe some other teams trade up too. But in any case, I think if this does happen, the Giants will take Jamar Chase.
Yeah. Well, let's just get him off the board because he can't fall any lower, right? So, because he was going to go with this pick. So the Eagles are sitting here, and I'm not going to waste too much time here. I think they're going to take Devonta Smith. I think this is one of the more locked in selections in the first 15 picks. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's not really much to say about it.
There's not much to say.
The only argument is, Horn or Surtain, because I do think corner is arguably a bigger need, but we're really splitting hairs in that case because wide receiver is a huge need, and Devonta Smith's skill set in particular is a huge need.
Yeah, I honestly, man, between this pick, the Surtain pick, and the Penny Swell pick, I think this is the third pick that I would bet money on.
I mean, the only difficulty is if Devonta Smith falls to the Eagles.
Well, who else is going to pick him?
I mean, it depends on how the draft shakes out, right? But I could see the Giants taking him. Yeah. I could see the Lions taking him.
I think he's going to fall, to be honest. I think if there's a bet out there that's like Devonta Smith under 10, I would bet it, personally.
Under 10? Or over 10, you mean?
Sorry, over 10.
There's a bet. The line is 11.5.
Oh, so
you're right.
A tricky number there. But no, I do think he's going to go 12 to Philadelphia. So
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that distinguishes them is their fact, because I think Sewell is going to be there at 5, and I think Surtain's going to be there at 10. I think it is a little bit more dubious whether Smith is there, but I think if he is there, I agree with you that is going to be the pick. So we're moving on here to pick 13. We're going to move a little faster now because we're out of the really dramatic. Yeah. So I think this is, I mean, I would probably bet this over the Devonta Smith one because I really think that Darisaw is going to be the pick for the Chargers here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you.
I mean, you could argue, the only other arguments I think you can make is Waddle, number 1, and J.C. Horn. And I think you can make good arguments there, but I don't think, I mean, Waddle to me would be the pick. If I were the Chargers, I would just pick Waddle because I think he's the best player available. But in my opinion, I don't think that I think he would be third on the Chargers list because of needs. The Chargers still have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams as their 1 and 2. And I would love to have Waddle as I think Waddle would be the 2 in that situation. But my point is, I would love to just get Waddle in there and be the third guy the third guy for Herbert to throw to. But Herbert did have success throwing to some relatively unknown guys like Jalen Guyton and Donald Parham. So, and I think they're another team who's kind of pigeonholed themselves into needing to take offensive line because they don't have a starting left tackle on their roster.
Yeah.
So Christian Darisaw makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And the Vikings have had a pretty closed book on what they're going to do with pick 14. Edge definitely is a need. I was looking at their roster today, and it definitely is a need for them in the long-term game. And Jalen Phillips would be a pretty good pick here for them. And with him rising up boards, I think it would make a lot of sense for him to go here. So once again, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. I think Jalen Phillips is going to go here. I think they're going to go defense. I mean, if a guy like Darisaw falls, which he doesn't in this, I could see them going that direction, but I think they're going to go defense, and Jalen Phillips is going to be my pick for the Vikings here.
Well, 2 reasons why I like that pick. Number 1, I saw a rumor yesterday that the Vikings were eyeing Jalen Phillips at 14. And obviously there's the rumors about Danielle Hunter wanting out of Minnesota. Yeah. And even if he doesn't, they still don't have a number 2 edge rusher there.
No, they don't.
So that makes sense. The other thing is what you mentioned about Darisaw not being there. I think if Darisaw is there, they would probably, pull the trigger, but they also really need guard more than they need tackle.
They do.
Because they have Brian O'Neill, who's a really good right tackle. He's their best offensive lineman. Then they also have some other people who can fill in at left tackle. You could move Ezra Cleveland back out there. The guard interior is what they really need, and that's the value just isn't there. So I really like that. it feels weird picking for the Patriots here because I really believe that they're going to sell out to get a quarterback in this draft.
Yeah.
But, obviously that's not the way that this has worked out. So with that being said, I'm going to have to make a secondary pick here. So if I'm doing that, let me think here.
I agree with you. It's funny that in our predictive mock, they didn't trade up. They probably would have traded up to Denver, but I just took Micah Parsons there just on a whim.
I mean, all the quarterbacks were gone at that point. Yeah. So, I mean, the one that would make sense, I said it earlier, is the Lions. But, that's not the direction we went. So, I mean, it is what it is. The draft is unpredictable, right? So that's part of what we're factoring in here is just trying to factor in the unpredictability of it.
Yeah, the Patriots are gambling in this situation by staying put, and they lost the gamble. All the quarterbacks went. So
and there is a dimension out there where there are no teams just can't get into the top 10 because the teams just aren't accepting the trade. Like the trade value is not working out. So that's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want that Jalen Waddle to fall to the Cardinals. But that's not how you mock draft. So I'm gonna take Jalen Waddle because I don't really see another player that makes more sense for the Patriots here besides Jalen Waddle.
They need more guys on their offense. So Jalen Waddle makes sense there completely.
Yeah, and they already have a complete O-line. The quarterbacks are gone. They've signed 2 tight ends to be some of the highest paid tight ends in the league. So receiver is really what they need. So there you go.
I'm going to make the fun pick here for the Cardinals. I do it in a lot of mocks because it's one of my favorite spots, and it's JOK going to the Cardinals at 16. I think it's super fun to have both of those guys on defense, like him and Isaiah Simmons, that is.
You think they would pass on J.C. Horn in this situation?
I mean, that's the argument, right? I guess it is predictive. What I think is fun and what I would want to do is
I wanted to kind of pull back the reins on you there because I know you like the JOK fit, but
you're probably right, actually. And
it is a predictive mock. I don't want to influence you too much, but I just had to remind you that he's there.
No, you're probably right. I was just so eager to jump the gun on how much I like JOK on the Cardinals, but you are right. It is a predictive mock, and they're probably going to go corner here. And JC Horn gets rumors. Like, we're at 15 now. A lot of people think JC Horn will go in the top 15.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to get him off the board because then it's getting a little too weird moving into the 20s and JC Horn hasn't been picked just based on where things are kind of tending to go. So pick 17, Oakland Raiders. Vegas Raiders. You're hot.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a tricky one, right? Because the Raiders are such a mess up. They're impossible to predict. We mentioned the Fairley pick from a few years ago where they picked him at 4 over guys like Josh Allen and some Ed Oliver, some other key defenders. And, he's kind of disappointed from that perspective. Then last year they picked Damon Arnett in the middle of the first round, who was, a huge shock. I didn't see him going in even in the second round, but he went, in the first round. Henry Ruggs was a bit of a surprise. Jonathan Abram, they just kind of make weird picks. So if I were them, I would take Christian Barmore because they did something stupid and cut Maurice Hurst for no apparent reason, who was their best defensive player. So that was weird. They kind of need to replace him, and Christian Barmore is a great fit to replace him. But will they do that? I have no idea. So this is a tough pick to make. I wish I wasn't in this position. The other thing is that they don't have a true cover safety. They obviously, like I said, they drafted Jonathan Abram, who, he's I don't even know how to explain it. He's like a box safety. He's like a dime linebacker. He can't cover. So there's that. And then they also re-signed Carl Joseph, who they drafted in the first round 5 years ago. He had a year on the Browns and he came back to the Raiders. He's a very similar player to Jonathan Abram. He also is not very good in coverage. So they need a cover safety. Morig is right there. That makes a lot of sense too. But again, the Raiders don't do things that make sense. So those would be my 2 top players on the board. I think they're going to take Tevin Jenkins here. Yeah. That's what I believe will happen. It's not the pick I would make, but it does. I mean, honestly, the other thing is will they even take the tackle that makes the most sense? Because they might, they might just take
Dylan
Radunes or somebody even worse than that. I don't know. like Brady Christensen or
Cosme.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I actually kind of like Cosme more than Redunes, but either way, my point is, but then we're just chasing our tails, kind of going in circles here. It's kind of hard to predict unpredictability.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm just going to go with, I think the Raiders, they kind of gouge their offensive line, probably with the thought that they're going to do something at 17 here to replace it. And Tevin Jenkins is a great fit for the Raiders. He's not who I would pick here with Barmore and Morrig on the board, but that's what I think happens.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's a Gruden grinder. So he's going to go there and he's going to fit right in. They're going to love him. At 18, we have the Dolphins back on the clock. There's a lot of good players here that they could take. Last time, I believe I had them taking Trevon Morrig, but I do think that there's a lot of good players available that they could take. Like, they do need a tackle, for sure. And one just went off.
They also, I just want to say, it just remind you if you didn't see, I think you did see it because I think you sent it to me actually. But they traded Eric Flowers this morning, who was their starting guard, right? So they do also need a guard now.
You need a guard. Let me filter by both guard and tackle here. Oh, whoops. Come on. There we go. Yeah, I mean, they do.
I think that's kind of like,
it's kind of a telltale sign of what they're planning.
Yeah.
I've also seen stuff about them trading down from this pick.
Right.
Which is interesting. I just don't know if these guys are really where they're going to go here at 18. Like, it is a telltale sign. You're right, but do they pick a guard? Like, it seems like
I think
maybe the smart thing to do, but it's hard to be predictive for them at this point.
So I just want to throw this out there. AVT is a guard. PFF has him listed at tackle because I know, like, I've watched their podcast. I know that they think he can play tackle.
Yeah, but he is.
I don't think he can play tackle. Like, his arms are super short. I think and he played tackle at USC, but I think he's going to be a guard in the NFL. So just keep that in mind.
For sure. I mean, Elijah Vera Tucker would be a good pick here for them because of his versatility across the line. And they do kind of need both a tackle and a guard. So wherever he does find his spot would be good. I could see them going Elijah Vera Tucker here. So I'll take him at 18 just to get that done and wrapped up for the Dolphins at 18.
Yeah, I think that's probably the direction they go. I mean, it's so hard. Doing a predictive mock draft is a lot harder than just picking who we want to pick.
Yeah.
Because we have to try and get inside the minds of teams who, like, do things that don't make sense all the time. And, I'm not saying trading Eric Flowers didn't make sense, because I do think that was, if you can get anything for him, that's probably smart, even though a lot of people think he's, really good at guard. He's not. Anyways, they kind of have put themselves in a position where they need to address that. And, it does make sense, because I do think AVT, even though I kind of talk shit on him on Twitter because I don't want the Giants to take him, because he's a guard and I don't think the positional value is there. The Dolphins can afford to make that kind of pick because they have so much draft capital. They can make up for that in other spots. Take the number one guard at 18. Sure, go ahead. Washington football team here. I'm on the clock with them. Tricky. I mean, if I were them, I might take Warwick. They love Cameron Curl, who they drafted last year, and obviously they have Landon Collins.
Yeah.
Who, he's a lot like Jonathan Abram. He can't really cover very well. So, I mean, getting a true coverage safety would be nice, but I don't think they will go that direction because, a lot of teams don't think that you can have three safeties that are good, but you absolutely can. You can get them on the field together all the time. So, but I don't think the football team will go in that direction. As far as their needs go, they have big needs on the offensive line, but they like their offensive line and they just traded for Eric Flowers. So don't think that's the direction they go. They need a possession type receiver. And there is a really good one sitting on the board here that makes a lot of sense. With that being said, they also like to stack up their defense, and they address the offense a lot in free agency. They do not have a single good linebacker on their team, which is weird to think because a lot of people think of the football team's defense as elite. Yeah. They don't have a good linebacker. So I'm going to take JOK here.
Yeah, great pick for them here. Great pick. And I think it's something that they would honestly might maybe do. Like in us being predictive, like I could see that happening. I'm on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, you might think it's a little unpredictable, but I do think they want to stack up. Like they want to, like if they win the division this year, it's going to be because of their defense, right?
Yeah,
not because of their offense.
Yeah.
So they want to make sure it's complete, and I think that's a good pick. And the other thing is that they lost Kevin Pierre-Louis. I can't remember who signed him, but he was like their best coverage linebacker. They don't have a single linebacker that can cover, so that would kind of be a nice way to fill in the gap there.
You're absolutely right. For the Bears, I'm going to take Andre Siska. I'm just kidding. I can't sabotage a division rival like that. In all seriousness, I mean, they're not going to go QB. They're just not. The Bears they're just not going to go QB. They are going to, I think, add a weapon to their offense for no reason. This is predictive. There are better picks to be made here, but I think they're going to take a receiver. But I don't think they're going to make the right pick here. No matter what they do, I think it's going to be wrong. So it's hard for me to really be predictive on how I think they're going to go. Like in the realm of possibilities, they could take Terrence Marshall Jr. In the realm of possibilities, they could take Kadarius Toney. Like the Bears are going to do something burnt here, and I just really think that it's going to be something that's super off the board. I really like Rashad Bateman, and I understand the concerns about his size that have come out, but I really do like him. Just the question is, do they need him right now? And that's what really stumps me. And
I mean, do they need him? Not necessarily, I guess, because, you can fill out a depth chart without him. But when you think about and we got to put ourselves in the position of the Bears here, which is so hard. But thinking about this rationally, Allen Robinson is probably gone after this year.
He's gone.
Anthony Miller, they're trying to trade him.
Yeah.
Right. So if those things come to fruition,
and they kind of like Mooney, but Mooney,
yeah, I was just gonna say your number one receiver would be Darnell Mooney in that situation, who I like, but you don't want him as your number one.
No, you don't.
If Dalton is going to succeed, I mean, he's going to need some weapons, and they're kind of all in this year. So
you might as well just take Rashad Bateman.
That would be my pick if I were the Bears. But again, it's we're getting to the point in the draft where it's kind of hard to think of how they would go.
Yeah.
Because number one, we're at a position where so much has happened. Like one single pick different in this draft that we have predicted, and everything is different. So we just kind of have to go.
Yeah.
We just kind of have to go off of what we kind of have to rely more on what we would do a little more at this point in the draft, but we are still going to try and make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here as the Colts, and I said this last draft. I said it in our trade video. They need a left tackle. They don't have one right now on their team. I have suggested I think it would be smart to get one that is left in free agency because you still do have Russell Okung, Eric Fisher, Mitchell Schwartz out there. Alejandro Villanueva, in my opinion, made the most sense, but he is now signed with the Baltimore Ravens. So now, I mean, the pool is a little bit smaller, but I still think that's the route they go because they need a proven player to start there. And the other thing is that the value here isn't great. I mean, I think if I was making a pick, Cosme would probably be my pick. But I don't think it makes sense. I don't think the Colts are a smart organization. They would not reach. I think they would either trade down or make the pick here. Mm-hmm. And it seems like we've committed to not doing trades because
we haven't done one yet.
We haven't done one yet. And the other thing, I mean, thinking about it now, it kind of makes sense not to do trades because trades are the most unpredictable thing out of the entire draft. You don't know who's going to trade up and who's not. So if we start messing with that, we're just, we're gonna be even more wrong than we were before.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm not going tackle here. I think they're going to go edge here. They don't really have an edge rusher to write home about right now, and I think Kwity Paye makes a ton of sense. I think if he was sitting here, I mean, he's my edge number 2. We've only drafted one edge, who also happens to be my edge number 1. So I think that makes a ton of sense. I'm going to go with Kwity Paye here.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot, which leaves the guy on the board that I wanted for the Tennessee Titans, and that's Caleb Fairley. They've lost Adoree Jackson, obviously, to the New York Football Giants, and I think that they're going to go defense here. There's definitely conversation about them taking a receiver. But I think if Caleb Farley falls to this point, that the Titans would be smart to pick him up. And once again, this is hard to predict what they do because they're a pretty complete football team. But I could see this being the route they take. So I'm going to take him here at 22 because he's still there. And I think he's a great player. And I think the Titans would benefit a lot from drafting him.
Well, a couple of things that are interesting about that. Number one, I actually don't believe that they are a complete team. I think they've fallen apart quite a bit this offseason. And honestly, I've made the prediction. I think they are a dark horse to be picking in the top 10 next year. I don't think they're going to be very good. But with that being said, I do think that this does make some sense. So number one, the Titans have done a lot of things this year that don't like make a lot of like logic, like this offseason. They don't make a lot of like clear sense for where we think they should be as a team. Releasing Adoree Jackson made no sense at all. Like
no sense.
It's arguably one of their biggest needs, and he was by far their best player at that position. And he was a young player too, like he's only 25, so that made no sense. And they've done a few other things, like I'm trying to think of an example. They don't have another, like they have AJ Brown, and then behind him on the depth chart is now Josh Reynolds and no one else.
Yeah.
The receiving core was one with Corey Davis and AJ Brown and Jonnu Smith was one of the biggest strengths of the entire team last year.
Yeah.
Their offensive line is getting older and falling apart a little bit. Last year, they let Jack Conklin go for no reason. So they have this kind of track record of making decisions that don't make sense really for the team where they are. And I'm not saying it doesn't make sense for you to make this pick in a predictive mock. I'm actually saying that it does. And the other reason why is because a few years ago, so obviously you have Caleb Farley with the injury concerns, right? That's why he's falling down the board here. A couple years ago, the Titans drafted Jeffrey Simmons in the first round, who had, number one, he had torn his ACL. And so he wasn't going to play for most of the year, most of his rookie year. Mm-hmm. And number two, he had character concerns because I don't want to get this wrong. So I'm not going to make it, I'm not going to say too much about it, but I believe he hit a woman or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyways, the Titans kind of are not afraid to take risks in the first round is my point here. Mm-hmm. Caleb Farley is certainly a risk with his injury concerns, and it certainly follows their model of what they've been doing these past couple of years, which is kind of coming out of left field and doing things that don't necessarily follow.
They're one of
the
harder picks to predict in this first round, like undoubtedly.
I mean, if it were you or me, I'm sure we would both go receiver and just get somebody to complement AJ Brown. Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they're going to take it. I really don't think that.
Yeah, I think the NFL just values receivers a lot less than we do and where they should, right? Which is kind of why the Waddle, Smith, and Chase fell.
Especially outside of the top guys. Like the NFL really values the best of the receivers. But when you start getting into like the mid first round guys, the NFL starts to just not care about them as much. It's weird. It's a very weird thing. When you're not getting fan pressure, like the Titans aren't getting fan pressure to draft a weapon. And when you're not getting that, it seems like the NFL just loses a little bit of interest in going that direction.
I agree. So we're on the clock. I'm on the clock here with the Jets for a second time. And we're in a bit of an interesting spot here. So they really need help in the secondary. And I mean, particularly at corner. Would they make it's so tough to do a predictive mock. We've said it 10 times by now, but it is really hard. Try doing it yourself and you'll see what we mean. Especially when we get to this later part, because for me, it's like they don't need interior defensive linemen. So Barmore is like virtually, there's no point in taking him, but Morrig and Newsome make a ton of sense to bolster the secondary.
Yeah.
They did bring in Lamarcus Joyner to play free safety next to Marcus May. So I don't think Morrig is going to be the pick, as much as I think that NFL teams should be leaning more towards using three safeties, because they're just versatile and we're leaning more towards the pass game. So Asante Samuel makes sense also, but he doesn't really fit the prototypical type of player that Robert Saleh wants in his defense. Greg Newsome is more like that. But let's go to edge for a second.
Yeah, Jason Edge is still sitting there as well.
Edge is what I think they might do in this situation. I would take
my Madden hero is Izo Jalari.
Yeah, I would take Greg Newsome, but do I think that's what they're going to do? And also, they need a guard. Look at interior for me. Landon Dickerson makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, they could bolster
protect Zach Wilson.
Protect Zach.
I mean, one of the things that I wrote down when I was watching Zach Wilson was that it's unbelievable how much time he gets in the pocket and how wide open his receivers are.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a rude awakening for him coming to the NFL, to the Jets no less,
Yeah.
if that doesn't happen. So, but Landon Dickerson does have a ton of injury concerns, so I don't know if the Jets would go this direction. I can't really do anything else here other than go with what I think makes the most sense, which is Greg Newsome.
I think, man, like we can try and be predictive all day long, but the draft is unpredictable past pick 2. So
yeah,
really, like anything can happen. We can only
That's very true. Yeah, and I mean, Greg Newsome makes a ton of sense. The Jets are making more smart decisions recently, so I'm gonna sleep well tonight making that pick, I think.
Yeah. So for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm going to go offensive line. Not going to waste too much time talking about why it makes sense. They lost a lot of guys on the O-line. So I'm going to go Dylan Randunes here. It explains itself. I mean, it doesn't take too much explaining. I think they're going O-line. I don't think they're going quarterback. Yeah, there's not too much to say about it. Steelers fans, let me know what you think about it. But I think
that's a very interesting pick. That's a very Steelers-like pick. I will say that.
Yeah.
Not the pick I would make, but that's not what we're doing. So no point spending too much time on it. I do think it is something the Steelers would consider. Although actually, I'm kind of having some regrets here because we did say we were going to make running back picks where it makes sense, and I do think the Steelers would take a running back.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe the Jets would too.
That's very true. No, I don't know. We could be selected by now.
We kind of made a mess of this situation, but it's tough to do, man.
It's all for entertainment. Hopefully, people watching are having fun. Watch our mock fall apart as we build. It started to really fall apart after like pick 17.
I would say after like pick 7.
Yeah.
But anyways, it is just for fun. I'm gonna do. I mean, I'm sure you're gonna do the same thing, but I'm gonna do my own like predictive mock draft before the draft anyways. So this is more just like to let everybody know like what we think is going to happen generally.
Yeah,
it's
and
not
talk
necessarily
about need and all that kind of stuff.
Not necessarily just the picks we make, but how we go about the process of thinking about how these teams are going to make these picks.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it. I'm sitting here with the Jaguars now. They don't need a running back, so I don't have to worry about the pain of pulling the trigger on that pick. They do need a tackle, but I mean, we've talked about this before. They do seem to love the tackles that they have, and there is good tackle depth later. So if they want to put somebody behind Cam Robinson, who's going to be a free agent next year, they can do that later. Morig makes a ton of sense here. They need a safety. He's the best safety in the class.
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to do that. I mean, I would love to pick Barmore here, who I think does make sense too, but Morig makes more sense, I think. So
no, you're absolutely right. And then that leads me into a situation where you make it easy and I take Barmore to the Browns because that makes tons of sense.
Oh, man. Think about that defensive line right now. Okay,
I know. It's scary, man. It's scary.
Clowney?
Lamar or Big Ben or Baker, you're not sleeping too well at night thinking about that coming up.
Good thing that the Steelers took an offensive lineman, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they cut Sheldon Richardson, though, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, the big secret is that I took Barmore knowing I was going to take a tackle for the Steelers to make it easy.
There you go.
No, I'm just kidding. You're on the clock
playing chess. Yeah. So Barmore, I do like that, though. So I'm trying to think. I don't know if you know this, but who is going to be their other in IDL? They play a 4-3. So who's going to be their other starting IDL?
For what team, sorry?
The Browns. I mean, I don't actually. I mean, this is something I haven't thought about because they release. I guess it would be Andrew Billings.
Did they release Claiborne?
Oh, they signed Malik Jackson. I just checked. So he's probably going to be their guy.
The only thing I ask you here on the clock with the Ravens is that you don't take the receiver that's looking there, so I can get him to Green Bay in 2 picks.
Well, there's no chance I'm going to take. I mean, Elijah Moore is. Like he's one of my favorite players in this class. I like that PFF has him so high on the board here because I love him a lot. I like him a lot too. But he makes no sense for the Ravens, right?
No, he doesn't.
The Ravens they don't need more small, like shifty guys who can play in the slot. They need a big X receiver, which the only one left is Terrace Marshall Jr. Now, it makes a ton of sense fit-wise, but we also are hearing rumors that Terrace Marshall Jr. is going to fall a little bit because of injury concerns, right? And the Ravens do pick again at 31. So if I'm sitting here as the Ravens, I think I'm probably not going to take Terrace Marshall Jr. and hope that he falls to me at 31. Of course, I'm sitting, here talking to the person who's going to be making picks for some of the teams in between. But I don't think Terrace Marshall Jr. makes much sense for anyone in between the Ravens 2 picks. So I feel comfortable with that. What else do they need? They obviously need a tackle.
They could go edge.
They could go edge. Let's look at edge really quick here.
Jason Away is still available, which is interesting.
He is, but he does not really fit with the Ravens. I'm going to pick Azeez Ojulari. He fits. He's a Raven.
He's such a Raven.
He fits what the Ravens want to do. He is a prototypical 3-4 outside linebacker.
Yeah.
I think he's ready to step in day one and be the best edge rusher on the Ravens. So there's other picks that could be made. They could use another linebacker maybe, although I do like Harrison and Queen as a duo there. They could, obviously we've talked about how they need a receiver, a tackle to replace Orlando Brown, even though they signed Villanueva for 1 year. And we've mentioned, if you don't need a tackle to come in and start, it does kind of make sense to wait a little bit because the depth in this class is really nice.
Absolutely.
So I think that's what the Ravens are going to do.
Yeah, let me ask you this. So for the Saints, I've been thinking about what they're going to do because they pick 1 pick ahead of my team. And I don't think they're going to draft a receiver, to be quite honest. I think they're going to go linebacker. And there's 2 guys that are intriguing to me, and I wonder your grade on them because they're the way that I see the Saints possibly going. And that's Nick Bolton or Zaven Collins.
Mm-hmm. Which
one do you think would fit the Saints scheme better and what they want to do? Because I think that's the direction they're going to go. I don't think they're going to go corner. I think they're going to go some sort of linebacker position at 28.
Okay. So it's interesting, right? Because obviously they have Demario Davis there. He is getting a little older. So if they make a pick for a linebacker, which again, like when we're getting this late, linebacker. So first of all, I'll say linebacker probably isn't what I would say the Saints will do here. But we're getting to the point where if you think that's what they're going to do, I don't think that's crazy because, NFL teams, they're thinking their own thing. Last year, did you think the Saints last year were going to trade up for Cesar Ruiz? No. So that's kind of out the window at this point. But I will just say that first of all. The second thing I'll say is that Demario Davis is getting up there in age, right? And then they brought in drafted in the 3rd round last year. He kind of fell more than most people were expected to, or was it maybe even the 4th? Anyways, Zach Bond last year they drafted.
Yeah.
And I think I want to say he played at Wisconsin. Doesn't matter. Anyways, Zach Bond is not the same player as Zaven Collins, but he was profiled as a lot like what Zaven Collins is, which is kind of this weird hybrid between edge and linebacker. Because, I'm not saying Zaven Collins plays edge because he does not have the skill set to play edge. But physically, he's 6'4", 270 pounds, which is huge for a linebacker. Usually, you see guys more like 6 foot, 250 type. He's massive, right? That kind of seems to me, and I like Zaven Collins a lot better than I like Nick Bolton. Like, to me, it's not really close. So, if I'm picking linebacker here for the Saints, I'm picking Zaven Collins. Nick Bolton kind of reminds me more of Demario Davis, maybe. But at the same time, we just saw last year the Saints kind of draft this kind of hybrid type guy who can, really take on blocks and, stack and shed. And that's really his skill set. Yeah. So I think he makes a lot of sense for the Saints.
And to make it really just fun for me, I get to draft Elijah Moore to the pack, which is what I want more than a lot of things in the world right now is for the pack to draft Elijah Moore. He fits so well with what we would be trying to do. We finally draft a 1st-round receiver. To be honest with you, this is supposed to be predictive, but I just need to do this to make me happy. I don't know what the hell we're going to do, to be quite frank. I listened to our GM interview yesterday, Gutenkast, and it was not it was not inspiring. It was pretty bland. I mean, he doesn't give any information on where he wants to go.
Which makes sense, but
yeah, I know. But like, just draft a receiver, please. Like,
yeah, I mean,
if we draft a tackle or something, I'm gonna be just hurt. I'm gonna be like ill if we draft a tackle.
Well, so here's a couple things, right? I think Elton Jenkins can play tackle.
Elton Jenkins can play
tackle. I would play him at right tackle if I were the Packers.
Yeah.
I would play Bakhtiari at left.
Yeah.
Elton Jenkins at right.
Yeah.
And then figure out your interior, like with, Runyon and all those other guys. Like, yeah. I mean, I think Quinn Miners makes a lot of sense, but he could fall to the spec. There's the way we've played this out, there's a ton of interior offensive linemen left. So I think, and number one, the Packers, if I were here doing a predictive mock, and if I were here doing what I would do mock, I would also take Elijah Moore in both cases.
Yeah.
Like I've said, I've already said I love Elijah Moore. He is exactly what the Packers need in two senses. He is a shorter guy. He's not this big, tall, receiver like they have next to Devontae Adams.
Cobb. That's what he is.
Yeah, he fits more like what Randall Cobb is. He's a shifty slot guy. And the other thing is, which is ironic because I'm talking about how the Packers have all these big, tall guys. They cannot go up in contested situations and make contested catches to save their life. Elijah Moore can. That's one of his best traits, despite being 5'9".
Yeah.
He's everything that the Packers don't have in a number 2 receiver. And on top of that, he is probably my receiver 4 or 5 in this class.
Like, he could be a number 1. He doesn't have the body type to be a number 1, but the skills to be a number 1.
He has the skill set. Yes, absolutely. So that makes a ton of sense. The only other thing that makes sense here to me is Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah.
Which, you could argue that makes more sense just because of the receiver depth in this class. Like Kadarius Toney's still sitting there, Rondale Moore's still sitting there. Yeah. Whereas Asante Samuel is the last true first-round corner, I believe, and they need to get Kevin King out of there.
And
despite the fact they re-signed him. Yeah, so getting him in there makes a lot of sense. And we've talked about this to death, but they have an aversion, it seems like, to taking first-round receivers.
Yeah, they do.
So maybe that makes more sense. But to me, it's just like the perfectness of the fit for Elijah Moore to Green Bay is just too what are we even doing it? Like if we're not going to have that kind of fun doing this video, then what's even the point?
Yeah, so, I want Elijah Moore on. If you get to have Jamar Chase, I get to have Elijah Moore. So that's how we're going to play this. That's fair. That's fair. Despite us being a much worse team, I will say that is fair. So I think this is where I'm going to do I think the Bills are going to take a running back here. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. So I mean, we would not take a running back in the first round, right? No, Let's make that very clear. We're both anti-running back.
Yes. And I think a lot of people think the Bills wouldn't do it because they think the Bills are a smart organization. I agree in some senses, but I disagree in others. I think they are smart because of the way that they've built up the O-line and the receiving core around Josh Allen and that kind of thing. But a lot of what they've done with the defense, I don't like. They have signed a lot of veteran free agents, which, it's worked out, but that's not really the way that you want to build your defense. Necessarily. So it's not like they have done, and you know what, honestly, the process on trading up for Josh Allen, people are going to hate me for it. I still think it was stupid because he was not a good prospect, he had a good season last year. There's no changing that, but there's also no changing history. He was not.
It wasn't the right move at the time. It worked out. They were lucky to roll a 6 on a 10-sided dice.
Yes.
Or on a 6-sided dice, I guess. But yeah, it wasn't a good move at the time. There's no doubt about that.
Exactly. So with that being said, I'm not trying to talk shit on the Bills here because I do think they are smarter than the average organization. But I've seen a lot of people say, oh, they're too smart to draft a running back. Not necessarily. They have made stupid moves that they've just gotten lucky and they've worked out in the past. Not to say they've made a lot of stupid moves or the majority of stupid moves or anything. I'm just saying they're not immune to this kind of decision. Yeah. And I think they are going to. So I saw this funny thing. I can't remember where I saw it, but it was people who draft a running back in the first round. This is what they're thinking, right? And I hope I don't botch this, but it's these scientists are doing an experiment on a frog, right? And they cut off its legs, okay? And then they tell it to jump, and the frog doesn't jump. And so they conclude that when you cut off a frog's legs, they can't hear anymore, or they go deaf. Obviously, the joke is that he's not jumping because he doesn't have any legs anymore, right? So that's people. So I probably botched that, but like it makes sense, right? That's people trying to diagnose why their run game doesn't work. Your run game doesn't work because you don't have the right blockers, right? It's not because you don't have a star running back, because virtually any running back can have success behind a great O-line. Yeah. So the Bills' running game, exactly. Ezekiel Elliott is exhibit A for that situation. Yeah. So the Bills' running game last year was obviously not good. And it's classic NFL team to go, oh, it's because we had Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, not because we had John Feliciano starting at guard, right? So to me, I would pick a guard here, and, you know, that's the move I would make. Help in both the pass game and the run game, you know, and then just help Zach Moss and Singletary as a two-headed monster. Maybe even sign a veteran guy who's still sitting out there.
Sign Frank Gore or something.
Yeah. Or, you know, maybe somebody better than Frank Gore, but I see your point. Anyways, that's what I would do, right? But this is the Bills concluding that, you know, frogs can't hear when you cut off their legs and taking a running back. Yeah. We spent enough time on this. The Bills are going to take Najee Harris here.
And I can just see the Bleacher Report graphics right now, big Harris and Allen, and it's just going to be going to be live tweeting at the draft. It's going to be fun. I'm going to take Terrence Marshall Jr. for all the reasons that you explained earlier. I think it actually does make sense they're going to go receiver in the first round, and he will fall, I believe, to this position. So Terrence Marshall Jr. is going to go to the Ravens at 30.
The Ravens, one of the biggest winners of the draft here, coming away with Azeez Ojulari and Terrace Marshall Jr.
Yeah. It was, I think they won the trade with the Chiefs.
Oh, not even close to me. You know, we can talk about that in a separate video maybe, but I think that was a bad, I don't know if it was a bad move for the Chiefs necessarily, but it was not a good move, I would say. And it was,
and the Ravens, it was a good move for the Ravens.
It was a good move for the Ravens.
And a not meaningless, but it was
they gave up a lot for a player that like is average, and they're going to have to pay a fuck ton of money, you know, when they could have just like used those assets in a different way.
Draft a player that would be better. They could have drafted a guy that's better at 31 and then have him for less money. It's not necessarily even that he's better. Like, there's a good chance. I think the factor is like there's a good chance that he is better, but also just the fact that you don't pay like 4 picks instead of just, you know, on one guy, you know. So I don't know. Anyways, the point is overpay by the Chiefs, and the Ravens kind of came away winners in that situation. So what I really want to do here, sitting here as the 32nd pick, is I want to do what like you do. Do you know what I want to do? Do you want to take a quarterback?
Well, yes and no. What I want to do is I want to trade up with a team in the second round and pick a quarterback. But we've already kind of established we're not doing trades. I don't know if you saw on Twitter yesterday, but there's people making predictions now that the Raiders could trade up for a quarterback. Yeah. And in our video from a couple weeks ago before the hiatus we took last week, I predicted that the Raiders could be a dark horse candidate to trade up for a quarterback. Now, obviously, it's not happened yet. I'm not taking a victory lap. But I'm saying I do kind of want to do that because now there's actually real rumors about it, where I just kind of pulled it out of my ass before. But like I said, we already kind of said we're not going to do trades, so we don't need to do that. But I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. So I'll throw that out there as the speculation that the Raiders could trade up here for, you know, Kellen Mond or Davis Mills, or maybe even Kyle Trask.
Yeah, Kellen Mond is their guy if they trade.
I could see that.
Kellen Mond is their guy if they trade up.
So, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do here is just, you know, what I think would be smart for the Buccaneers to do. I'm going to take Asante Samuel Jr. here. Now, obviously, they don't need a corner, not even close, right? They have Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, and Sean Murphy-Bunting, right? So they don't need to do that, but filling in the depth, this is how they became good in the secondary, right? Because they drafted like Vernon Hargraves and Justin Evans and all those guys, and they didn't work out. And so what they did is they kept drafting in the secondary, and eventually they got, you know, really good players in the secondary. So Carlton Davis is eventually going to be a free agent, and so are all these other guys. Get another guy in there in the secondary who is by far the best player available, in my opinion. And, you know, you're set up for the future as well as currently. I think it's just that simple. So maybe not the obvious pick, but
A good one, nonetheless.
The pick that I think would be made in that situation.
Yeah. So here's our final 2021 final mock draft on the channel. It's kind of sad that this will be our final mock draft, but we did our best to put together something fun for you here. We'll be talking a lot about stuff after the draft, like I said. But as you can see, as I scroll here, this is what we came away with no trades being involved. And I think a lot of it does make sense of where we think guys are going to go and team needs specifically. I think we did a good job of addressing what the teams probably think about when they make the picks, as well as players that match with the team culture and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that there are, looking back on this, and it's just the nature of the beast, right? The nature of the draft. There are a few things that I think I might do differently already, and that's just how these things fluctuate.
That's what makes the draft fun.
You operate with razor thin margins when you're, predicting the draft. And so, sometimes you change your mind at the drop of a hat, and exactly that's what makes the draft fun. So we're going to see in 2 days on Thursday night what actually happens. And hopefully we're a little bit close here on some of these picks and trying to get inside the heads of these teams. So it'll be interesting. Absolutely.
And what we'll do actually probably next week, next Friday, when our show comes out, you'll hear our I guess we'll do a full first round review. We'll go through the first round of what actually happened, and we'll talk about if we thought it was good or not and how close we were really on where we thought teams were going to go. Because knowing our teams, the Packers are probably going to take like a tackle or a tight end, and the Giants are going to take Christian Barmore. So
yeah,
we'll be back with some either tears or happy thoughts of how the draft plays out. But this is what makes it so much fun for all of us to always talk about. So thank you for watching. Unless you want to add anything in at the end, we'll wrap up.
No, I think I said all I want to say for now, other than, I'm excited for the draft, and I hope everybody out there is excited too, because it's going to be a really fun night.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with more draft content, and hopefully our teams don't draft tackles. Thank you very much, and we'll see you guys later.